is Johnny.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Why so serious?
I am Iron Man.
This is a tasty burger.
Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast.
Welcome to episode 614 for December 10th, 2024, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Brendan Cassidy.
Hey, thanks for joining us, everybody, as we are getting close to the end of the year, which is crazy to think about. It's the holidays, a lot of fun to be had, some great movies on the horizon. We just had a great conversation on The Brutalist that just came out yesterday as this episode is dropped and available to the public.
Yeah, surprisingly
really
not
our
longest review, surprisingly.
Yeah, not our longest, but a film that I would consider to be one of the better films of the year, and it is certainly going to be quite heavily in the discourse over the next few months, as it will be a major contender for the Oscars, and that is going to be the bulk of the conversation on this week's episode. We're going to be talking about those pesky Golden Globe nominations that came out just the other day.
Globes are gonna globe.
They're gonna globe. We'll also talk about the AFI top 10 that came out last week as well. So we'll have some awards conversation. There's a Chasing the Gold episode already out as well. If you want to hear Shadon and Erica break down the Golden Globe nominations, they talked about their reaction to it. And they're certainly in the know more than we are, but we're still going to give our thoughts on the Globes here in the back half of the episode. To begin, we'll start, as we always do, is the parade on or off. And as you could imagine, the box office last week was dominated by 3 films. Can you venture a guess as to which 3 films I could possibly be talking about?
The Wild Robot being one of them, right?
It
makes a surprise comeback.
That would be incredible.
Juror number 2 is also another one, right?
Yeah, that would be really amazing as well.
Yeah. Of course not. We're being facetious here. We've got to talk about Moana 2, Wicked, and Gladiator 2.
Yep. So those 3 dominating the box office once again. Moana in its second weekend, reining in another $51.2 million domestically, which brings its total to $301.8. Worldwide, we're sitting at 601.8. So it's well on its way to $1 billion.
If I saw those numbers correctly, though, it had a 60-ish% drop, if I'm not mistaken.
It did have a 63.3% drop. That is for sure.
Yeah, that's kind of a high drop, at least by comparison to something that was doing so well, which makes it seem like maybe this was a very, I don't want to say short-lived, because we're still very early in the box office process for a movie like this, but definitely seemed to be very much topical word of mouth on the onset, as opposed to what we're seeing here.
Yeah, and I'd be curious as to what that is in relation to, let's say, Inside Out 2, which is the film it is obviously chasing as far as that top spot is concerned. I don't really recall what the week-to-week drop was for Inside Out 2 getting to its second weekend. Maybe I can try to pull up those numbers here real quick.
Google AI, which I don't know if this is the most reliable of sources, says it had a 35% drop in its second
I see that here. Yep, 35%.
Okay, so that's actually a big difference. That's a big difference.
That's a huge difference.
Yeah.
So maybe the legs of Moana. Obviously, Moana 2 is still going to do well. It's already done extremely well.
Yeah.
But when we're talking about the top prize, I don't know if it's going to have the legs to get that far, if the percentage is indicative of what's to come in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, if it's chasing a movie like Inside Out 2, and this is indicative of it not passing Inside Out 2, I'm glad the better movie is the one that's going to hold out on top.
I agree. I agree. I agree.
You know, the
Now,
one that was actually supposed to be a movie in the first place.
Yeah. If you missed last week's show, Brendan and I briefly talked about Moana 2. You may have noticed we did not put out a review for Moana 2 because we are not huge fans of the film. Not big fans of that film all that much, but the audience scores for it though are quite high.
Yeah.
So people are really liking the film. I noted last week on the show when I was walking out of the theater, all I could hear was people, raving about it. My son included. Audiences love it. In fact, even on our InSession Film Facebook group, if you want to go and join us there on Facebook, I'd say it was a little bit of back and forth. Like our critic peers didn't really like it, but those that are in there that are not critics, they had more positive things to say.
Yeah,
so
it's a very interesting dichotomy there.
It is. So, but the 63% drop is interesting. That is quite the drop for sure.
I'm very
still
curious.
Won the box office though.
It still won the box office. Yeah, I'm still, but it makes me even more curious to see what happens next weekend.
I agree. I agree.
Yeah.
Wicked coming in second place with another 36.4 million domestically. That is now up to 325.
Yep.
Domestically, worldwide 460.
Yep. Already one of the highest grossing Broadway adaptations ever. And most of those, if I'm not mistaken, most of those Broadway adaptations that are among the highest grossing come from different decades. It was a very different era back when movies like Grease, for instance, were huge hits, right? Certainly a different era now. So I wonder what this means for movies like Wicked going forward. If we see more adaptations from the stage to the screen that actually have more, bankability, if you will.
Yeah.
I wonder if this is a new trend.
Yeah, something that's not Cats, right? That was a disaster from
talking about the greatest movie ever made?
That was a total disaster. But yeah, I mean, generally we've certainly seen Broadway to film adaptations that have done really well. I can't recall the exact episode, but it wasn't too long ago. I feel like we were talking about something like Les Mis and how well that did. And that was 12 years ago at this point?
It was 2012. Yeah.
2012, but that did very well financially.
So did Mamma Mia in 2008. Was that? So there have been individual ones that did well, but then you also had movies like Into the Woods, for instance, that may not have done so well. And of course, you mentioned Cats. That's a great example of one that did not do well in any category. And even Spielberg's West Side Story, right? Which should have been the biggest hit of that year, right? Absolutely should have been. It's a bit unpredictable now, but Wicked is definitely on the higher end of that for sure.
Well, I do wonder about West Side Story if it came out in a different year, because that came out in 2021. We are still reeling with the pandemic, and of course, that's going to affect the box office and the success of that film. If it came out, let's say today or even right before in 2019, I bet that film kills. Well, at the very least, it does much better than it did.
It would certainly do better if it came after something like Wicked and the successful trend it's setting, right?
For sure.
But even so, I think you're right. If it didn't come out in 2021, I think there would have been a positive story to say regarding West Side Story, because from looking at it here, West Side Story was technically considered a box office failure. I think it only made 70 some million at the box office, which is not very good.
It only made 76 worldwide, but again, that was it was late 2021, but still it was it wasn't a great year for theater still.
Right.
It wasn't
some that weren't even open again yet. Some were still closed.
It wouldn't have been until Top Gun Maverick in the following summer, where things really started to open up. Yeah. So it just came out at a bad time. I don't think it would have done and like it obviously wouldn't have done wicked numbers. I'm not saying that at all.
No.
But it would have done much better than some. I bet it could have doubled its money.
Sure.
From 76. I bet it could have doubled that at the very least.
Yeah, I think it could have. That could have been an easy one for it.
Because if in a normal setting, you would be able to market the film differently than what they had to back then.
Mm-hmm.
And I think with a full marketing campaign and Steven Spielberg behind it, I think the film could have done much, much, much better. But
yeah. Even despite its $100 million
it
budget, it still would have had to do even better than twice what it actually did. But even so, it would have definitely made more than 76 million. Like that's not great.
No, not great at all. Lastly, I just want to note here, in the year of our Lord 2024, Interstellar gets a 10-year anniversary re-release and does another $4.6 million domestically, which is crazy for a 10-year re-release.
People like that movie. They really do. People are connecting with it.
Yeah, they really, really do love themselves some Interstellar. So that is wild. Like, it's crazy that film brought in that much money. I think total in its re-release numbers, it's done like 5.6 domestically. That's just crazy.
That's incredible. That's incredible. Yeah.
Absolutely incredible.
Not a fan of the movie that much, but I think it's incredible to see something like that happen.
Yeah. I mean, people like you and I are clearly, I think as time goes on, we're increasingly becoming more and more alone on our island when it comes to Interstellar.
That movie makes me so bitter, but I want to love it so much. I really do.
Yeah. I mean, we've talked about it so many times here on the show. It is at parts one of the best films ever made.
Yeah.
And in other parts, one of the more frustrating films ever made for me.
I agree. It's Nolan's best and worst movie, as we keep saying.
Yeah. Which is to say, I'm glad to see that it's doing well. I'm glad it's affecting people. I love when people go to the cinema and have a transcendent spiritual experience.
Yeah.
And that is often how people talk about Interstellar. So
yeah, especially for a movie like that, right? Because we talked about this before with regard to the box office in 2024 specifically. Like this is a very odd example to compare Interstellar to, but another sci-fi movie from this year like Alien Romulus did very good numbers, right? You and I didn't love that movie, but we love to see movies like that actually have an artistic craft to them do well. And say what you will about Interstellar, you and I are not big fans of it, but it's made with craft. That is an artistically crafted blockbuster. And if any movie is going to do well in this kind of situation, I'm glad it's something like that and not a re-release of Deadpool and Wolverine, right? So I'm glad it's something like this.
No, I completely agree. Even if I don't share the same spiritual high as others do, I am really happy to see it. I know the feeling. I love when we're able to get that out of movies. So certainly did want to note that. Lastly, another thing I want to mention here real fast is the animated film Flow. So that is a film that we did review last week. And that film so far has gone on to do almost $4.1 million worldwide. And this last weekend, it had a significant jump up as far as domestic showings go and domestic numbers go. So for a small little foreign animated film that obviously isn't going to get a whole lot of marketing here, if anything at all.
Yeah,
for it
with
to
no
do
dialogue
as well as it's done,
as well.
With no dialogue, and for it to do as well as it's done at the box office, as limited it may be, it's doing quite well given the context. So I wanted to note that as well. I thought that was an interesting little story from this last weekend. So.
Very interesting for sure.
Before we get to the Golden Globes, we do have to note this little piece of news that came out yesterday as we are recording this. Chris Evans is officially coming back to the MCU as well in Avengers Doomsday. What do you think about that?
I mean, how is this news? Isn't this something that everyone kind of knew? I mean, this just
maybe
feels like
assumed.
This just feels like confirmation of a very popular, well agreed upon theory, right? Of course, they don't confirm who he's coming back to play. They just said Chris Evans, right? We don't know if it's Steve Rogers or heck, if it's Johnny Storm coming back. I don't care. At this point, I just don't care anymore. I don't think, this type of medium movie specifically doesn't really call for this type of narrative thrust that most comic books have. I get how it could work and be very exciting in that type of medium. I just don't. I just think this is Marvel realizing that they've made mistakes and they're desperately trying to course correct themselves. I heard someone say that this news is indicative that Captain America Brave New World is actually in serious trouble. I don't know if I'm willing to go that far because I don't think they're necessarily intertwined, but maybe they are. Maybe this is kind of a last-ditch effort for them in many ways, but it does kind of feel that way.
It really does. It really does. Now, I want to emphasize this in case we have new listeners who may not have heard us talk about Marvel before or have any sort of context as to where we're coming from. I grew up reading Marvel comics. It was a staple of my childhood, specifically Spider-Man. But I've talked a lot over the last few years when it comes to the Fantastic Four and some of the storylines that they've been wanting to go down as far as Kang goes and Secret Wars and all of that stuff that's been laid out.
Yeah.
I've read all those comics. And I enjoyed them. I think they're really good. I think there's a ton of potential of it, especially with Kang. I was a little disappointed with where that ended up going because I think Kang is really great in comic book form. Maybe it wouldn't have worked in film form, especially now that we've done the multiverse thing so many times in the MCU to this point. I think it has become troublesome.
It's time to retire it.
Yeah. But, the story in the comics, I do think is great. So fundamentally, I think there's some great things there. And I think at times they've done it well. I really like Spider-Man No Way Home. I thought was phenomenal. That was really great. As far as some of the other stuff, maybe even a lot of the other stuff, it has left a little bit to be desired. At any rate, I've really enjoyed the MCU for the most part. I've come on this show. I have championed the MCU. I've defended a lot of those films. I've had a lot of fun with them. I think for the most part, given what they are, it's been a really great ride, especially all the way through Infinity War. And even with Phase 4, you and I came on the show and we defended some of it, more so than a lot of other people did.
Eternals rules.
You think about Eternals especially, I think is really great. So I really liked Shang-Chi and I liked the Hawkeye series. Jeremy Renner was great in that. So there's been a lot to enjoy. Moon Knight, I will stand up for my boy, Oscar Isaac as well.
That's an interesting one. Yeah, I like that one too.
So, that is to say I've mostly enjoyed the MCU.
Loki's my favorite. Loki I think is amazing.
Exactly. Loki's been really great. And you've certainly come on here and had your fair share of defense for it as well. When Ryan and Jay were on the show, there were admittedly at times where I felt like I was utterly alone in terms of having to talk about and defend these movies. Not that I think they're, great works of art or anything like that. I just think they're really fun for what they are. Now, that said, I say all of that to say I'm very close to being done with the MCU.
I think a lot of people
at the
are.
point of where I'm jumping off.
A lot of people in our circle certainly are. I'm sure that there are others out there who are genuinely excited about this news, but I mean, our circle doesn't seem to be. I don't know of any of our peers that seem to be excited about this news. In our bubble, this just seems like I said earlier, a last ditch effort. And we can sense that. We can sense the seams breaking at Marvel Studios right now. And it doesn't look good.
It just doesn't look good. This screams of desperation. They're really struggling to find their feet. And they just want to go back to what had worked before. And I think they had done such a great job of crystallizing RDJ and Chris Evans and those characters, and even Elizabeth Olsen, because there's talk about, like, Feige hinted that she's coming back as well, or at least Scarlet Witch is coming back, which suggests that Elizabeth Olsen is coming back. And going back to that conversation and Doctor Strange, like, I don't want that either. I think that character also went out appropriately. Now, I mean, I guess you can conjure all kinds of magical spells to bring these characters back.
Yeah, you can make up the rules as you go along.
You can make up the rules as you go. But from an emotional, narrative, dramatic perspective, there is no reason to bring those characters back. You sent them on their way impeccably. You can let them rest peacefully. But money's volumes.
Money. Money's money.
But like
it just yeah. It really
creatively
seems as
bankrupt.
It really seems as though, given the misdirection of the MCU for phases 4 and 5 and how the multiverse has really started to collapse on itself, Marvel is using this as an opportunity by bringing back RDJ in a new capacity, but still RDJ nonetheless, and now Chris Evans. It's almost like they're trying to crystallize the Infinity Saga all over again, right? It's like they realized they made a mistake with phase 4 and 5. It wasn't properly planned out, and of course some of those things were beyond their control given the Jonathan Majors of it all. That was certainly part of it as well, and I can't blame Marvel for that. But I don't think they've really handled the creative trajectory around that from the get-go, regardless of that happening or not. So they're going back to what did work to try and crystallize what did work and what wasn't working. I feel like this is their way of bringing it all back together to finally put a bow on it. And we've theorized about this. I feel like once we get to the end of Avengers Doomsday, something's going to happen that just streamlines everything into a new beginning. So if we do get phases, I don't know what's coming after Doomsday. Is that phase 7? I think is that what that is?
I don't even know at this point.
They might not even call it phases anymore. I'm kind of lost on all the phases right now. Even the mapping of it just seems so confusing. But I feel like whatever it is post Avengers Doomsday is going to feel like, at least I hope it is, it's going to feel like how it was when we saw Iron Man back in 2008. I hope it's going to feel introductory into something new once again, maybe with some carryover, and it almost like a soft reset of sorts. And I think that's what they're building towards.
Well, and the thing is, with phase 4, they had already done that already, right?
They were trying to,
Eternals. They had introduced new characters and had set the stages for them to bring in new Avengers. They had done a lot of work to set the table for young Avengers. Is that something that's going to come to fruition? A lot of speculation seems to suggest that it's not. So we've wasted a lot of time for what? To bring back RDJ and Chris Evans. Great. The last 6 years was a gigantic waste of time. I guess 4 years. Yeah. I mean, what are we doing here? What are we doing here? Like, I understand this is a cash grab.
Yeah, but back in phase 3, 4 years, a lot happened, right? That was methodically planned. Here, to your point, 4 years goes by. Have we learned anything new? No. Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why I don't even know what phase we're in anymore. I'm so confused.
It's all confusing. Now, some of it isn't their fault.
Right.
They could never have predicted that Jonathan Majors would turn out to be what he is. Or if they did have an indication and cast him anyway, then it is their fault. I don't know. I don't have any sort of inside baseball there. However, they obviously did not anticipate that going the way that it did and had to pivot. And it's possible, given the reaction to Ant-Man and the Wasp, or Quantumania, or whatever it was called.
Yeah, what a title.
Given the reactions to that, they might have wanted to pivot at least a little bit to begin with. The King stuff, as interesting as I thought it could be, and Jonathan Majors, say what you will about him as a person, I do think he was a great artist.
Yeah.
He could have pulled off the character.
I agree.
But things were not going well, and it feels inevitable that this is where we're going to land. And I think because they're constantly pivoting, there is really no vision or direction, to your point about how phase 3 was meticulously crafted. What is the direction? Where are we going? Because now you introduce Deadpool and Wolverine, and that offers its own set of, context and circumstances that's going to change things a little bit. Are you bringing back Scarlet Witch? Is the X-Men ever going to be involved here? Are we going to get Channing Tatum Gambit movie that is just seemingly on the table?
What's going on with Blade?
What's going on with Blade? What's going on with Shang-Chi? Is that character coming back? There's been some interesting, I don't want to say reports, but people are pointing out that, forgive me, I can't recall the actor's name off the cuff here.
Oh, from Shang-Chi?
Yes. Forgive me, I can't remember his name.
Simu Liu, I believe his name is.
Yes. Yeah, he's been commenting or liking posts that are, the foundation of the tweet is they should have done a sequel already.
Yeah.
People are
and he's not wrong.
Taking
he's not
that
wrong.
kind of stuff. Yeah, absolutely. So, it just, I say all that to say, I don't think it's just the fans. Even the performers, the cast themselves, they seem like they're clueless in all of this. And now we're about to bring in Daredevil and everything that comes with that as well. Spider-Man 4 is apparently on the table. It's like, what is going on here? It just feels like we're just throwing everything at the wall, and like nothing makes sense. And then on top of that, we're bringing back RDJ and Chris Evans. Okay. All the power to you, I guess. I have
no
don't
words.
understand
I have no words
what we're
anymore.
doing.
Yeah. I also have no more
it's
excitement
frustrating.
anymore. So it's at that point now.
Yeah, and like over the last 4 years, the discourse around Marvel and the MCU has been infuriating to me, even though I've enjoyed many of the films and even some of the TV shows, as we mentioned earlier. I liked Moonlight, liked Eternals, liked Doctor Strange.
Hey, you and I also went to bat for Agatha all along.
Yeah, went to bat for Agatha. Thought that was really fantastic.
Yeah.
So there's been some really good things out there, and yet I find myself watching these things in a vacuum and then completely removing myself from the conversation because I find it so exhausting.
Yeah.
The conversation around the MCU is so exhausting. And now Marvel themselves is putting themselves in a position where I just don't know if I can put any energy toward it because it feels fruitless. I've talked about this before. Like a big part of why I love movies and I don't do much TV is because there's a lot of investment into TV. And you can watch 3, 4, 5, a dozen seasons of a television show, and the studio can just take that away from you at any moment.
Oh yeah, it can just get
without
canceled.
any sort of crystallization, no ending to it at all. It's like, or with something like The Walking Dead, I watched the first, 5, 6 seasons.
Oh yeah,
of
I
that
never
show.
finished that. The second
then-
Negan got introduced, it's like I lost.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I can't remember what season that was. It was like season 5 or something.
I think it was
that.
5 or 6, something around there.
Yeah. So I watched the first 5 seasons, and then when Negan is introduced, I'm out.
Yeah.
So like however many seasons came after that, I just wasted my time. I wasted my time watching 5 seasons of a show, and then I never got any sort of satisfaction, or I never got to see how things ended because I just didn't care anymore. And that's ultimately where Marvel is going for me right now. It's like I've invested so much time into this, and it feels like a television show where I'm about to just jump ship.
That's
and
how
I'm
they
never going to
treated
see
it.
how
Yeah.
it all ends.
The sunk cost concept is becoming more real when it comes to Marvel nowadays, because we've invested all this time, and I'm just losing that interest, and even the discourse surrounding it now. It'd be one thing if the artistic end product was enough to justify that discourse, but so much of this is made with so much passivity that it doesn't seem to warrant this type of discourse anyway.
Yeah.
All these movies look the same now. All these Marvel shows, mostly, not all of them, but some of them kind of they look like they're creatively done by the same committee every time. And a lot of it is
that's another thing too. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like the same thing I feel about with most of Star Wars' content now. There's a lot of discourse surrounding, let's say, something like The Acolyte, for instance. I don't think the show was good or even bad enough to warrant that type of discourse. And I'm feeling the same way about Marvel, just as far as the artistic products that they're making. I don't think it's warranted, honestly.
No, I completely agree. I completely agree. And I hope that there is change. I hope there's something to reinvigorate this franchise, and that they can, take what they've created and really, make something fun and big and create the spectacle of Infinity War all over again. They're clearly trying to do that with Doomsday. And we don't even know what character Chris Evans is going to play, which that's another thing that I find so mind-boggling here, because if it was part of the multiverse and he's just going to be another Captain America, I feel like they would have just said that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, why would you, does that really need to be a surprise?
I don't
He's
know.
just going to be Captain America again?
Watch him be playing like Miles Morales or something like that. Something so silly.
I mean, and if it's not going to be Captain America, is it going to be a Johnny Storm, like a multiverse Johnny Storm, as we saw in Deadpool?
Yeah.
I mean, but again, does that have to be a surprise? Like, what are we doing here? There's no reason to keep it a secret unless he's playing a different character altogether. And in that case, why? Why cast him specifically as he's a completely different character?
I wouldn't be surprised if they're to make this into like some type of verb. If they're RDJing him by bringing him back, he's probably going to be playing some iconic villain. That's what I think they're doing.
Okay. Yeah, I just I can't do it. They're gonna have to do some work to bring me back. And like I say that saddeningly because, like I said, I grew up reading Marvel comics. It was such a staple of my childhood. I love them, and I've enjoyed a lot of these movies. But I'm getting to the point where
I'm tired.
I can't do it. Yeah,
I'm tired. I just want to talk about good movies now.
I'm Llewyn Davis tired. I just can't do it anymore.
You've lost your close friend, that friend being the old MCU.
All right, Brennan, we're about to talk about the award season. We're going to be talking about the Golden Globes, a little AFI. However, the one thing that maybe we can reveal right now is that both of those organizations, all of these organizations, have really missed an opportunity because we're all missing out on the best picture of the year, which we all know is Venom: The Last Dance.
These awards pundits have failed. They failed at their jobs. Yeah.
Yes. Venom: The Last Dance is clearly one of the top 10 movies of the year. We all know this.
It's the greatest bromance of all time. It's the greatest bromance trilogy ever made.
I mean, you think about the sacrifice that Venom makes at the end of the film. Spoiler alert. I won't reveal any more context. There is a sacrifice to be made. Who knows what happened?
It's such a beautiful movie.
It's like
Last Dance.
Not a dry eye in the house, right? Like, it's just a tearjerker. Great romantic comedy there. So
it's a fun movie. It's really a fun movie, man.
I enjoyed it a lot. And look, we have 5 digital codes of Venom: The Last Dance to give away. And I will admit this is going to be really challenging to give away all 5 of these because my son is going to be desperately asking me for one of them. So,
okay.
When we do this contest, you're going to have to make a great case as to why you need one of these digital codes because I can't make my son cry.
Yeah, he's not going to take it well. He's going to throw a symbiotic tantrum.
No, but we have 5 digital codes to give away. If you want to get your hands on one of these beautiful, beautiful codes, follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky. at InSession Film, on all of those platforms. And you'll see some information later on this week on how you can win one of these babies. And look, again, it's the best picture of the year. Tom Hardy, Venom, incredible.
When we talk about trilogy closers, this is going to be topping everyone's list.
Yeah, exactly. So be on the lookout for that. Follow us on social media for your chance to win a copy of Venom: The Last Dance. We certainly thank Venom: The Last Dance for their support. All right, Brendan, let's talk about coffee. I love it. You love it. We all love it. We
Just
need it.
thinking about coffee is a stress reliever. It really is.
It is the best. It is the best. It's why we love Coffee Cult. They source specialty grade coffee from all over the world, and it's really great. If you don't know what that means, specialty grade coffee is your high-end gourmet coffee. And there's a couple of different ways to process specialty grade. Coffee Cult goes the extra mile to ensure that every single bean is consistent with high-end quality. They are not skipping out at all in the process, which means it's not your cheap store-bought coffee. It is maybe a little pricier, but you're talking about high-end gourmet coffee with rich notes of chocolate or strawberry, cherry, depending on the kind of coffee that you get.
All authentically and organically derived from
organic.
those cocoa beans. No artificial additives.
No artificial flavorings.
Add those flavors to it. Absolutely.
Exactly. No chemicals. It is all organic to the coffee. So this, it's a great coffee that you can enjoy on its own. You don't have to add a bunch of sugary nonsense to it. It's just really, really good coffee. And we love it. You can get the holiday blend. That's my favorite, the holiday blend. It is pitch perfect for the season. Really,
so many
really
great
festive.
So many great flavors there that you can pick from, not just the holiday blend, which is also one of my favorites as well, but many dark roasts there. If you like your dark roast, I highly recommend the Sumatra. Certainly one of the best dark roasts that I think I've ever had. Yeah,
the Sumatra is really, really great as well. I love the Harar. The Ethiopian Harar is it's like this rich blueberry taste. It's just so good. So go to coffeecult.com. That's coffee with a K, cult with a K, coffeecult.com. Use our code ISF24, ISF24, and you'll get 15% off your order. Again, that code is ISF24, coffeecult.com. We thank Coffee Cult for their support. All right, with all of that said, we're going to go ahead and transition here. We're going to now talk about the Golden Globes.
Okay.
And we'll also talk about this year's top 10 AFI. But we'll start here with the Golden Globes. I'm curious, Brendan, let's just start broadly. What did you think about the overarching crop of nominees here?
Predictable. Pretty predictable. A few surprises here. I still have questions for the Globes. And this is what I also love and hate about the Golden Globes is that they sometimes categorize things in ways that I just don't understand. The big thing being, what do they even define as musical or comedy anymore? I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I guess The Substance is a comedy now. And I mean, when we reviewed that film, I did argue that the film is very funny because it has such a heightened sensibility to it. The biggest question I have is regarding that categorization. If I'm going to cite a specific example here, A Complete Unknown, best motion picture drama. That's where it's nominated for. Guess what past James Mangold film was nominated for best motion picture, comedy, or musical? Walk the Line. So what are we doing here?
Well, and so you haven't even seen A Complete Unknown.
Oh, I have. I did watch that just earlier today, so I have seen it.
Okay, so you have seen it. Now, I don't know if you agree with my sentiment or not. Like, the reviews just dropped for this, actually, I think earlier today as we are recording this.
Yeah, that's when the embargo lifted.
A lot of the sentiment, it's kind of mixed. I think it debuted at like a 62 or 65 on Metacritic.
I think
which isn't the greatest.
I think it's up to like a 70 now.
Is it up to a 70? Okay. I knew initially it was in the 60s.
It's up to a 70. Yeah, it's up to 70 now with 28 critic reviews compiled for it.
Yeah. At any rate, I would argue that A Complete Unknown is not just a musical, it is maybe the most musical of the year, because this is a film that has a musical number every 45 seconds. Like it is a concert film. That's how I've described it. It is a concert film. It is all about its music. So the fact that it's in drama and not musical is wild to me. Absolutely wild.
I'll say this. I agree with your description. I don't know if we'll disagree or not as far as whether we like that approach with the movie or not. But I do agree it's certainly more of a quote-unquote musical by comparison to even something like Walk the Line, which was nominated for Best Picture, Comedy, or Musical.
And there's much more of a dramatic through line in that film.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So to your point, now, to be fair, up until last year, it was the Hollywood Foreign Press that did the Golden Globes. That is disbanded. It is a different group now. They have restructured everything after they were, for the lack of a better term, canceled because of their corruption and lack of diversity in their nominees and everything they went through some years ago. So the Hollywood Foreign Press is no more. It is a different group that is running things now. So if you want to chalk that up to, hey, look, Brendan, it's a new era of the Golden Globes. We do things differently now. We do things differently these days. Okay. I can maybe get behind that sentiment, but I need to still see some consistency, because I do think, and maybe this speaks to your sentiment there a moment ago, the overall nominees here are kind of a mess still. Like it's still kind of all over the place.
Well, you brought up the notion that the Hollywood Foreign Press was disbanded for multiple reasons. One of them being, if I recall correctly, as you cited, criticisms that there wasn't enough variety with regard to these nominees. And if I look at these nominees very quickly, especially when we get to the acting categories, I still feel like I'm not sensing much diversity. Like this kind of feels like a set of nominees that would have happened under the Hollywood Foreign Press. Like it still feels like it's kind of in line and in keeping with what we've seen the Golden Globes offer us, historically speaking. And that's kind of what I think is funny about all of this. I'd say really the only quote unquote new thing that they have to offer here is probably the most egregiously silly thing that they've offered here. And it's this category for best box office achievement, which is, I've got so many thoughts on the sheer existence of that category. And I'm trying to, I have it open here. We have Alien Romulus, Beetlejuice, Deadpool Wolverine, Gladiator 2, Inside Out 2, The Wild Robot, Twisters, and Wicked. So we have 8 movies nominated here for box office or cinematic achievement of the year. And if I scroll all the way back up here to Best Motion Picture Drama, Dune Part 2 is nominated there, and yet that is not considered a cinematic achievement. I don't get their definitions of things. I really don't.
It makes no sense. No, it makes no sense. I completely agree. That was an egregious error that people had pointed out, was Dune Part 2 not being in that category, which is insane. Like there's just no justification for leaving that out. And then to your point about the lack of diversity, that is also a question mark here. Now, I guess to be fair, when it comes to director, they did nominate 2 women.
There were some surprises there. I will give them that.
Yeah, they had Corley Farge for The Substance and Payal Kapadia for All We Imagine as Light, which is an inspired nomination.
Very much.
That is incredible. That is probably my favorite nomination of this entire crop, except for maybe one other, which we'll get to here in a little bit.
Okay.
But that is an inspired nomination. I love that film. I do hope that we find a spot to give that film a review. I think it is gorgeous. It is one of the best films of the year. Okay. And for that for Kapadia to be nominated, I think is incredible. That is incredible work by this group of voters here. So they did get 2 women into director. However, there is certainly an oversight when you think of for Best Actress, no Marianne Jean-Baptiste, which I think is kind of wild that she's missing here. There's no Daniel Deadweiler in here as well. Nickel Boys only gets in for picture and nothing else, which is weird.
Yeah, which, Ramel Ross's direction in that film is kind of the thing that makes that film so special.
Yes.
You would think he should be somewhere within that Best Director lineup. And I guess keeping to the same theme as well, one of the, I don't want to call him a front runner because he obviously wasn't, but there was a lot of speculation that, what's his name? Clarence Macklin from Sing Sing was going to be one of those nominees for Best Supporting
Macklin
Actor.
does not get in. Yeah, I think for Sing Sing, only Coleman Domingo, right?
Yeah. And for my
He's
money,
the only one there.
Yeah, for my money personally, Clarence Macklin gives the best performance in that movie. I would have loved to have seen him recognized here.
Yeah, no screenplay. I don't think it made it. It didn't make it in for Best Picture as well. Like Coleman Domingo was the only nomination for that film. It's crazy. Just Nickel Boys and Sing Sing completely underperform. You couple that with no Deadweiler, no Jean-Baptiste, and it just makes you wonder if the old Hollywood foreign press mentality is creeping its way into this group. Now, obviously that isn't the case for everybody.
Right.
And I don't think the Globes is exclusive to this either. It's not just a Globes problem.
Right.
It's maybe, if anything, it's just a bit ironic given that they had to restructure, given everything a few years ago. And I want to maybe give them a little bit of patience because if memory serves, I thought they did a great job last year.
Yeah, I agree.
The nominations they had last year was really, really good. And maybe, it's kind of like what we've talked about even with the Academy after they've restructured in 2016 where Moonlight wins Best Picture. Incredible.
Yeah.
The very next year, Green Book.
This is shaping into that type of reversal.
It's shaping into that same exact narrative. Yeah. So it's like, okay, let's just give them some time. Because the Academy, while they've had their misses for sure, they're slowly but surely starting to evolve into a completely different group than we had 10, 15, 20, 30 years ago. Yeah. And this new group with the Globes, they're at the very beginning stages of that. So maybe we just need to give them some time.
Yeah. So
even though there are some egregious, misses here.
So if it does go in a similar direction as a Green Book winning Best Picture the next year after Moonlight won, what are we going to see win Best Picture drama and musical or comedy at the Globes if it were to continue that trend? Does that mean September 5 and Amelia Perez are going to be our winners then? Is that what we're going to be seeing?
I don't know. Like September 5 is another one of those weird nominations, right? Because I don't think it's nominated for literally anything else, and then somehow shows up in drama.
That's the thing. It's like you've got these 2 Best Picture categories, and you have 6 slots to fill for each. It's like you got to start fishing for some, especially for musical or comedy, which is such a specific category already.
Yeah.
Yeah. So then you have to fill that in with a movie like The Substance, which has a bit of a gray area to it. Even Challengers, I'm not even sure if I would call that a comedy. There's such a grayness to how we define that.
Yeah.
In a way, I wouldn't mind if they just nixed that category altogether.
Yeah, they probably could or should combine them. It is what makes the Globes different, though. So maybe, honestly, I can understand the argument both ways. But
in a way, I kind of like that it's here too, because every year that they nominate things, we always have something to complain about and how they categorize movies. So it's honestly kind of funny sometimes.
I mean, Challengers, I don't like as much as others do, but I can understand why it is nominated here. Just flip that with a complete unknown. Just put Challengers in drama, put a complete unknown into musical because it is a musical, and it's fine. You don't have to really change anything as far as the films go.
I agree.
Keep the same films, just flip those two.
I agree.
And then I think it's fine. Because the rest of music or comedy, I understand. I don't agree with all of them. I don't like Amelia Perez. And that led the entire group. I think they had 10 nominations in total. Wild.
Yeah, that was the leading number of nominations for film. 10 nominations. I think behind that was The Brutalist with 7, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, The Brutalist was in second place there.
Yeah.
But, so for musical or comedy, you got Honora, Challengers, Perez, A Real Pain, The Substance, Wicked. Understandable.
Yeah.
That's a best picture lineup for musical or comedy that at the very least is understandable. And again, if you want to flip flop Challengers and A Complete Unknown, it certainly makes sense when you look at the other categories and what's nominated.
Yeah.
Nickel Boys in September 5? Where does that come from? I just don't understand that. Especially when you have Kapadia in for All We Imagine as Light.
Yeah.
And I know that film is nominated for foreign language, but that could have made its way into Best Motion Picture Drama.
For sure.
Instead of September 5, for example. Now, I'm glad that Nickel Boys is there. Do not get me wrong. That is one of the very best films of the year. So I'm happy that Nickel Boys is in for Best Picture, but it's just a little strange that it shows up only in Best Picture, like with nothing else.
With nothing else,
how do you make it to the top? Top prize without anything else.
That basically means that they're seeing it as like a placeholder filler, right?
That's what it suggests. Yeah,
and I mean, I don't want to play our cards too early, but when you look at Best Picture Drama and the 6 movies nominated there, I think the argument is that Nickel Boys, for most of us, especially you and I, probably the best film in that crop there. So you would think that it has more support underneath it, but the fact that it's only a placeholder to fill in that 6th slot is kind of unfortunate.
Yeah, it's wild. And look, I mean, I can understand why the performances maybe aren't there, although I do think there's one supporting performance that at the very least should have been considered.
I thought she would have been nominated. That was kind of a surprise.
I thought so as well. But you could also have gave it a bone for screenplay. If you're not going to nominate it for director, and Ramel Ross, as far as I'm concerned, that category begins and ends with him. But you could have thrown it in for screenplay.
Yeah.
Because Honora, The Brutalist, Conclave, A Real Plane, Perez especially, The Substance, all of those films had plenty of other nominations in other categories. You could have removed one of those for a Nickel Boys.
Yeah.
And then it makes at least a little bit more sense that it shows up in Best Picture.
Ramel Ross really should be among these Best Director nominees. And I'm looking at the 6 that they have here. Obviously, I wouldn't want to see Jacques Audiard there for Amelia Perez. I would personally take him out, but I understand why he's here, given the overarching love
for it.
Yeah, like that. So that one I understand, but if there's anyone here that Ramel Ross could have easily replaced, and I think that would have made sense, it's maybe Edward Berger for Conclave. And that's not to knock Conclave, but I think as far as movies being this technical directorial achievement, Nickel Boys has something that obviously, people have seen to nominate it for Best Picture, but it has a technical precision to it that should be recognized in this way. And certainly more than Conclave, I'd say.
And Conclave is in screenplay, and that is a category that makes more sense for that film when you think about its writing and its melodrama, even though I don't feel it as much as others, but people are certainly talking about that. Or even in my case, the way it fosters a conversation around faith and how we grapple with faith in the modern age specifically. That film tackles that in some incredible ways in the screenplay. So keeping Conclave as far as screenplay goes, I think is absolutely warranted. And to your point, you keep Conclave there and you remove Berger for director, and you put Ramel Ross there. That makes sense to me.
Yep.
I think there's a lot of merit to that. And then again, it makes sense that Nickel Boys then shows up for Best Picture. But we're talking about the globes, and the globes are going to globe.
They're going to globe. They are going to globe. You mentioned earlier that there's one other category that you were excited about that you thought they did pretty well as far as representation. I'm going to take a wild guess that category is Best Original Score.
That is Best Original Score, yeah.
Okay.
In particular, I wanted to shout out Chris Bowers getting in for The Wild Robot. I have been championing the heck out of that. And it's funny, I haven't really mentioned this on the show. My wife got me an early Christmas gift.
It's
something that Brendan and another friend of ours, Mark Herney, God bless him, shout out Mark, they have been harping on me for years to get a record player.
Nah, there you go,
because
man. There you go.
I do get a lot of these scores on vinyl. They're sent to me as gifts. And throughout the years, I've kept some of them. I've honestly shipped some of them to Brendan because I know he has one and could get good use out of them.
Yeah.
And I get one for The Wild Robot, and I look at my wife, and I don't even have to say anything. I just plead with her with my eyes. I need to get one because I really want to listen to this vinyl, the score for The Wild Robot.
Yeah.
And bless her heart, she had already gotten one. And I come home from work and she surprises me with it. And this was, I don't know, a week and a half ago or something. And so I was able to set it up and I was able to play that vinyl. It was the first vinyl I played on.
Good
that
for
record
you.
player.
You
Awesome.
finally popped your vinyl cherry. I love it.
I did. It was quite fantastic. So we've had fun playing with it. The kids enjoyed a lot as well. So a huge Chris Bauer fan. I am absolutely through the roof excited that score got nominated here.
Born to score that movie. I do think overall Best Original Score does have a good set of nominees. Of course, I don't agree with everything, mostly being if you're going to nominate Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross, I actually prefer their work for Queer than I do Challengers.
I almost tweeted that out the other day because I'm starting to feel the same way, even though it's certainly going to be a little bit of a hipster, perhaps hot takey sentiment this award season. Yeah, and we haven't got to Queer. We're going to talk about Queer actually very, very soon. I think that's next week. That's on the docket for next week.
Yep.
And spoiler alert, I agree with Brendan. As much as I love the score for Challengers, it is a ton of fun. I love the energy. It's great. But man, what they bring for Queer is really, really special. It's a very different score, but it's very different. Yeah.
I think musically, I think it just fits more with what JD and I tend to like musically. I think it's just more our taste, maybe. But I love the way it fits that movie. I think it's quite
for sure.
beautiful.
I've been listening to it a lot on Spotify, and it's really good. But I'm fine with them just being nominated because they had a great year. Yeah. And Challengers, I understand people really love that score, and it does have a great energy to it. That is hard to deny. Sure. Honestly, I have no problem with 5 of these. Like if these are the 5 Oscar nominees, I'll be thrilled. Amelia Perez is the outlier here for me.
Same here. Same. I would agree with that.
Landslide here.
I would agree.
So don't love that nomination, but they love that movie. So again, it's not a shocker that it's here, but
I'm with you. I don't hate this category. I'm trying to look at some of these other categories here to see if there are any outliers that stick out in kind of a humorous way. Sebastian Stan nominated twice.
Before we get to Stan, can I circle back to the music just real quick?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
While we're talking about music. I don't have a whole lot of thoughts on Best Original Song, but I do want to note that The Wild Robot was also nominated for song for the number Kiss the Sky. Yeah. And that's noteworthy. It's a really great song. I do really like it. The reason it's noteworthy though is that gives The Wild Robot 4 nominations, which makes it the most nominated animated film ever. I just wanted to throw that out there as well. I think that was really significant. And obviously I love it. I think it's not just the best animated film of the year, but one of the best films of the year, period. And certainly an indication that it's probably going to win best animated feature for the Globes at the very least.
Yeah.
But yeah, the fact that it got 4 nominations, I think is quite incredible. So I just wanted to throw that out there because we had never seen that before.
Sure.
But Sebastian Stan, yes.
Yeah,
I agree.
Nominated twice. So I guess A Different Man is purely a comedy, according to this. Although I
Okay.
slightly understand that. Where I think it gets even funnier is that I guess the horror movie Heretic is also a comedy, given Hugh Grant's nomination.
Honestly, I think I understand that more than I do A Different Man.
Sure, yeah,
because
the script,
of
the
his
script for that one is
performance,
it's heightened, but even the script there
yeah.
and the thematic ideas, they do have this kind of like almost like this satirical bite to it. So I kind of get the comedic categorization there. Yeah, okay, yeah. I could see that.
Yeah, that's why even though it's obviously a horror film at its core, it's kind of a horror comedy in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
and when I'm watching Heretic, I got a grin on my face almost the entire time, especially through that first half. Maybe when it gets more visceral in the second half, that dissipates a little bit. But man, when Hugh Grant is just having the time of his life as that character and sparring verbally with those two characters, it is quite humorous, or at least the satire it does bring a joy for sure.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So but Different Man. I wasn't laughing a whole lot with the film. Maybe a moment or two.
It's quirky. It's amusing at times. I don't know. Like when we talked about that movie, we talked about how it goes beyond genre classification. I don't think you can really pin that movie into any category as far as a genre category. So I just laugh at the placement of it here. That okay. So I guess those here see it as a comedy. So okay, sure.
But and again, like I think this is where you have an opportunity to flip flop Timothée Chalamet and Sebastian Stan, because again, I didn't break down the math when I was watching A Complete Unknown, but I would venture a bet that Chalamet does more singing in that film than he does talking.
He absolutely does. As someone who has just finished the movie a few hours ago, he absolutely sings more than he speaks.
He sings more than he speaks. That is a concert film. So just put him in musical, put Sebastian Stan as a double nominee in drama, and I think we're good. I don't think you really have to change much. And honestly, when it comes to the acting categories, honestly, I don't really have too much of an issue here. Like I really like a lot of these.
I like a lot of
nominations. Like I don't love The Apprentice as a film, but I think Sebastian Stan is really great in his role there. The fact that he got double nominated is fantastic. Domingo is really great. Daniel Craig, cannot wait to talk about him next week. I don't love A Complete Unknown, but Chalamet I think is really good. Brody's really good. Like I don't have really much of an issue there with that category. And I think, Glenn Powell, that's a really fun nomination. Remembering Jesse Plemons and Kinds of Kindness, like he's arguably the best thing about that whole experience.
I will say there are a few occasions here where the nominees are suggesting that they haven't forgotten certain films, like Hitman, for instance, or Kinds of Kindness. And Kinds of Kindness is a movie I didn't love, but Jesse Plemons certainly being the standout there, and I think he's great in it.
He's
Glenn
really,
Powell
really
being,
good. Yeah.
Even Gabriel LaBelle getting nominated for Saturday Night, that
really
was
fun.
kind of a nice surprise. I thought that was really sweet.
No, I completely agree. There are certainly, a few others that are debatable that should have been here for sure. But on the whole, I think the acting categories did a good job.
Yeah. And of course, when we get to our InSession Film Awards, we may have very different nominees like we always do. But then again, we also recognize that what we think are some of the best performances of the year don't necessarily translate to an awards voter's opinion as the best performance of the year, right? Like we sort of talked about this offline and even on the show in passing conversation. Like one of my favorite performers of the year is Nell Tiger Free for The First Omen. She's not going to be nominated in any category anywhere. I understand that, but she'll be one of mine, and I'm happy about that.
Given expectations, it's understandable that these are the names they land on, and I do think all of these are worthy. Like they give really good performances. And I do appreciate that they don't forget something like Jesse Plemons. Even if, you don't have to agree that he gives one of the best, one of the top 5 best performances of the year. I do think it is a striking performance and worthy to be in the conversation at the very least. And the fact that they went for it, I do kind of appreciate. Same thing with Glenn Powell. I think is really fun.
Looking at all these individuals who are nominated for any acting category, and I also have to admit I haven't seen everything. Most of the women nominated for Best Female Leading Performance in a Motion Picture Drama, I have a lot of blind spots for the movies that are nominated there, so I will admit that. But of those who are nominated, of those that I've seen, really the only acting nominee I'm a little, I don't know if I agree with that, is Edward Norton in A Complete Unknown. That one I just think is
supporting.
Well, not even regardless of the categorization. I just feel like he's giving a performance in that movie that he can do in his sleep. There's just nothing there's nothing standout about that to me.
I will. There is one moment that I think is really good, and maybe we can talk about that more in depth when we actually do the review for that film. But I don't think it's an Edward Norton problem. I think the screenplay to that film, if you can even call it that,
what screenplay? That movie's a sizzle reel.
It's a concert film. There's no writing. There's like no characterization. Like what is he supposed to do? Like I think so it's not a Norton problem. But to your point, does that warrant a nomination? I can absolutely see that argument.
That's my
for
thing.
Sure.
Yeah,
but I think he brings a charm to the role. Like there are a few instances where I think he comes to play that I really do appreciate. On the whole, though, for me, that category is, it's Yura Borisov. The fact that he's nominated there. Yes.
I think at this point now,
of course.
I think Yura Borisov is getting the Oscar nomination. I think he's
I think he is. Yeah, I think he's on his way to getting an Oscar nomination for sure.
I feel like it's still Kieran Culkin that's the front runner at this point if I had to predict the winner.
No,
but
I agree.
It's weird to say that number 2 behind him might be Yura Borisov right now.
It could. I mean, Guy Pearce, I love that he's in there as well. I loved him in The Brutalist. Jeremy Strong, I do think is an inspired pick there because he hasn't been in the conversation all that much. But I think he gives, pun intended, a really strong performance in that film. And then, of course, Denzel's Denzel, and he's having the ball at the time of his life in Gladiator 2. So, again, it's a category that I wholly understand. And some of these will absolutely end up in my top 5 as well when we get to the InSession Film Awards. I think of the nominees here for Best Supporting Actor, I think the 5 that will be nominated for the Oscar are in this 6. I think the 5 can be derived from here. Drama? No. Best Supporting Actor is not. For Supporting Actor.
Supporting Actor. We're still talking about Yura Borisov and Kieran Culkin. I think.
No, I agree. I agree. I think. Yeah. And here's the thing, like Jeremy Strong is the one that I think is out, but the other 5,
I agree. I think the other 5. I think those are your 5 nominees for Best Supporting Actor at the Oscars.
Yeah. The only question I have is Terrence Macklin from Sing Sing. Does he get in? I think he still has a case.
He has a chance. Yeah. I don't know. I guess
think he's got a shot.
He has a shot. I just wouldn't be surprised if it's the 5 that we just laid out there.
And ultimately, I don't think that you're wrong, but I wonder if he's there. And I was gonna bring up another name, but as soon as I started to bring it up, I kind of doubted myself. So
okay, interesting. Okay,
I'll just leave that alone. Well, because I was gonna bring up Adam Pearson was gonna be the other name because he's at least been in the conversation. He's been nominated from other critics groups, but I think that's more of a a long shot.
I think that's kind of a niche nominee amongst those of us right now, unfortunately.
A bunch of the critics groups.
Yeah.
Okay. I did want to bring up the actress categories because you noted you have some blind spots. I have 2 as well. I have not seen Lee yet. I have had every opportunity to see Lee for like 3 months now. And because of the reaction to it, I just keep, pushing it back because
You just keep prioritizing other things. I get it.
Because I wanted to see Nosferatu. I wanted to see A Complete Unknown. I wanted to see I'm Still Here, and a bunch of these other movies. So I can't speak to it. The Last Showgirl is another one I haven't seen. It is next on my list. I just haven't had a chance to get to it by the time we recorded, but I'm going to get to that this week. So I can't really speak to it, but obviously people keep talking about Pamela Anderson and how great she is in that film. So
yeah,
I am really looking forward to it. The other 4 nominees I have seen, there is one standout here. And I don't know where the votes are going to go, but I think of these nominees here, it is Fernando Torres. She is easily the best, again, of those I've seen in this category that I've seen. I think that is among one of the very best performances generally of the year.
Okay.
She's a towering presence, and I'm Still Here, and was really excited to see that film get nominated or her performance get nominated here because it's really, really great.
Yeah. Do you think she has a chance of winning? Because I feel like the edge might go to Angelina Jolie at this point.
Well, and that's like, it's an interesting crop, right? Because you have Pamela Anderson, who, gives this, again, I haven't seen the film, but just generally she's giving this performance that's, similar to someone like Demi Moore in The Substance, right? Where it feels like her career has always been building to this. Yeah. A little bit of her Irishman moment, if you will.
Sure.
Then you have Tilda Swinton in The Room Next Door, which that's a film and maybe even performance that's been a little polarized, but they've clearly gone for it. There's Nicole Kidman doing Kidman things, and Angelina Jolie, who I think is one of the most, she's been nominated for like 10 Globes at this point, I think. Like 9 or 10 Globes.
Yeah, quite a bit.
Crazy.
Quite a bit.
Kate Winslet, they tend to like it's kind of an eclectic mix here. It's hard to say. It's hard to say with that group because I feel like the conversation has been more focused on some of the leading ladies in the other category in musical or comedy. So like of these 6, it feels like it's a little up in the air, but it's I think you're right. I think ultimately it's Angelina Jolie.
I think it might be her time, especially given the talk around her performance in Maria, which I haven't seen yet. I'm looking forward to it because
she's really good. She's the best thing about it. I know too. I'll shout out Dave Giannini, our editor-in-chief at InSessionFilm.com. He made a really great point where he was talking about how she's so big, like so famous, that it might be difficult for some viewers to see the character and not. It's, oh my gosh, that's Angelina Jolie.
Yeah.
I could understand that maybe being a hurdle as far as
that's a good point. Yeah.
People, going for that performance. Now, obviously they loved it enough to nominate it.
Sure.
But does it win? I could see that maybe being a little bit of a challenge for her. I think in the end though, it's probably Jolie, unless they want to go the narrative route with Pamela Anderson. I could see that happening.
Yeah. Honestly, I said Jolie earlier, but honestly, I don't really know where it could go between these 6.
I think drama is kind of up in the air for sure.
Well, just once again showcases how stacked that this category usually is. Almost every year, Best Actress in a Leading Role is a very competitive crop every year. And that's certainly the case once again, for sure.
Well, absolutely. And I think what's interesting about actress in musical or comedy, I think like both films, or both categories are going to be competitive, but for very different reasons. Like drama feels like it's a little bit open.
Yeah.
We don't really know where, like, it could go in a number of directions. Music or comedy just feels like it's a tight race. Night Bitch, Amy Adams, God love her, is last on the list here.
She has no
probably.
chance. She has no chance.
She
of
has no
winning here.
chance. But you can't count out Carla Sofia Gasson. They love Amelia Perez. Mikey Madison's being talked up as maybe the front runner for even the Oscar. She's going to be part of it. Demi Moore, not only being talked about a lot as far as one of the best performances of the year, but she has that Pamela Anderson like narrative, right? Where we've been building to this performance. And then there's the superstar that is Zendaya, and Challengers has several nominations. It's clearly a film they like as well. So it just feels like this race is just really heated, really tight, and it's going to come down to the wire. And that's going to be a really fun category as well. So it's like,
I like when I can't predict things too easily. I like that. Yeah, I'm with you. I could see any one of those other 5 outside of Amy Adams, sadly, winning this award.
Yeah.
And you didn't even mention Cynthia Erivo. She's
Cynthia Erivo, like
she gives the most powerhouse performance of them. Certainly the most showy because it requires that. But that's perhaps something that the voters will latch on to because it is the most performance of most of these, I guess.
Yeah, and it's a film that is, it's one of the bigger films of the year. Wicked is certainly nominated several different times here. And it is a towering performance. It's a lot of performance and I think she's equally in the conversation. Yeah, Cynthia Erivo certainly did not mean to skip on her, but I think those 5 are kind of neck and neck. In a much tighter race where drama's wide open. This one's like it's really going to come down the wire, which is going to be fun to watch. It's going to be interesting to see how that one unfolds.
Yeah, going to have fun trying to make a prediction on that one.
For sure. Any other final thoughts on the Globes before we move on?
We didn't really acknowledge best supporting actress for a motion picture.
Okay.
And honestly, between these, I'm not too surprised by any of them, although I will once again maybe throw the term category fraud out there, although it's not the Golden Globes' fault. But I mean, Zoe Saldana is absolutely a lead in Amelia Perez. She absolutely is.
She's
but of course,
more of a lead than the other 2.
Yeah, absolutely. But of course, given this is how the movie itself, how Netflix and all want that, this is how they want to campaign this movie. So it's not the fault of the Globes for categorizing her this way. But I just think it's funny that to me, it's clearly category fraud. Even though I think
it might work.
It might
that's
work.
The other thing too is like, Felicity Jones, you and I, and not just you and I, a lot of people really love that performance. But does she pose a threat to Saldana here? That I don't know. I'm a little dubious. Margaret Qualley might. That could be the one, or even Ariana Grande for similar reasons. Wicked's this huge film. Isabella Rossellini is barely in conclave. That's a nomination that's like, who else can we throw in here?
Yeah, I think she's great like in the 1 or 2 scenes that she has.
Very good.
But it does feel like it almost feels like they want to nominate someone that has this like, oh, they're in the movie for 3 minutes, let's nominate them kind of narrative.
Yeah, someone that we really love. I mean, because obviously Rossellini's a legendary actress.
She's a legend. So. She's in the club. I think this is Zoe Saldana's to lose at this point.
Yeah, and where that feels different than the other 2 categories we just talked about, right? Like it just feels like Saldana is heavily here. So as long as she doesn't stumble and fall, she's gonna win. So category fraud working in this case.
Yeah, I get it. Even if I don't, agree with it, but sometimes you have to do it that way. It's called the politicking of the movie business.
Yep, that's how you play the game, baby.
Yeah.
All right. So those are the 2025 Golden Globe nominations. We also wanted to talk about the AFI top 10 of the year as well.
Yep.
Where do you want to start here? Do you have any broad thoughts on these 10 here?
Well, I guess
All right,
before we,
should we list them? You want to list
I was
them?
just going to say, let's go ahead and list them for those listening who may not have had a chance to really relish in what the 10 are.
Yeah. All right. So we have Honora.
Mm-hmm.
We got The Brutalist.
Mm-hmm.
A Complete Unknown. Conclave. Dune Part 2. Amelia Perez. Nickel Boys. A Real Pain. Sing Sing. And everyone's favorite witches in Wicked. So those are your 10. Top
Those are
10
the 10.
AFI motion pictures of the year. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think this might be the 10 at the Oscars.
Yeah, that's what everyone's been saying. It certainly feels that way, right? Like it feels like this is our 10. Yeah.
It does. It really does. I will say, if that is the case, I think it is reflective of the year as a whole in many ways, which I don't want to get too much into now because we'll obviously talk about our thoughts on the year when we do our award show in a month's time, right? But I will say it is pretty indicative that I think this particular award season isn't fully as strong as past years have been. I think this is a solid list. That's the best thing I could say about it. I think it's a solid list. But there are other movies I like more this year that may not qualify as quote unquote awards players by the traditional definition. I think it just goes to show that it's a very different type of year by comparison to previous years. I like a lot of movies on this list. This might be one of those years where the least amount of them end up in my top 20 of the year, I'll simply say. Some of them I'm still kind of marinating on. So there could still be some changes and some that I like more as I continue to think about them, especially since as we're recording this, some of these I've only seen maybe like 2 days ago, right?
Yeah, sure,
so I'm
sure.
kind of sitting with them. But it is one of those years where maybe I don't have as much crossover between this type of consensus with my own list, which I think is kind of interesting, honestly. I think it makes for an interesting year nonetheless.
Yeah, I do agree broadly that this is a lesser 10 than what we've seen the last few years for sure. But on the whole, I still really do like the list here. There's really only 2 films that I am not all that much of a fan of.
Yeah,
And
I'm
then
guessing
there's-
they're the 2 that I'm guessing it's the same 2 that I'm
Yeah.
thinking of as well.
And
I
look,
think
given this conversation, it's not going to be all that hard to figure out.
I mean, you whispered one of those films as if to just try and get by it. Of course, being Amelia Perez.
Yeah, that one's easy. Yeah, that one's easy. There's another one on here I'm not all that high on either. And then I would say there's a third film on here that actually I do like, but lukewarm. Like it won't end up in my top 20 of the year. But on the whole, I do like it. I would certainly take it over the other 2 that we're kind of referencing here.
Sure.
The other ones, all of them, I was going to say the rest of them are in my top 20, but I don't think that's entirely true now that I'm thinking about it. But I do, as of right now, and this could obviously change, there's about a month until we do the InSession Film Awards. And as it stands currently, 4 of these films are in my top 10, which isn't as high as it's been the last few years. So in some ways, it's a little nostalgic because it takes me back to the early years of our tenure of like 2013 and 14 and 15, where I would cross over on probably like 3 or 4 of them annually. Like that's like usually about how it would be, like, 2, 3, 4, somewhere in that range. And that's about where I'm at with 2024. So I do think it's still a really good year for film, but it is quite different, I think, than what we've seen the last few years.
I agree. I agree.
For reasons we don't have to get into here. We'll certainly talk about that a lot when we get to the InSession Film Awards. But I mean, I don't mind the list on the whole. The 4 that I do cross over on, I'm really high on, and maybe 1 or 2 of these, given our conversations on them. I mean, one of them I'll just give away because we just talked about The Brutalist this week. It's the first review that's already out. You can go and listen to it on the feed, or if you're watching us on YouTube, you can find our review on the YouTube channel as well. I was higher on that film than Brendan, but as he noted, he's still kind of wrestling with it. It's a lot of movie. He just saw it. So he's still wrestling with it. That is one of the best films of the year for me. So that is like, I don't have to wrestle with it like Brendan has. I saw it a month and a half ago.
Yeah. So
not quite that, about a month ago.
Yeah, you had enough time to compartmentalize its 17-hour runtime.
Yes, I've had more time to sit on it than Brendan.
And that's why I say when I think of these movies and I try to see how many of them cross over into my current top 20, a movie like The Brutalist, when I say it's not in my top 20, I say that with an asterisk because that's kind of the biggest one that's at that wavering possibility right now. At this point now, I've got 2 films in this top 10 that cross over into my top 10. And those are also the only 2 films that cross over into my top 20 at this point. So that's kind of a rarity for me, given the pattern over the past few years. I will say maybe about 5 of these do cross over into my top 30 if I'm going to stretch it out that far. But the fact that only 2 of these are in my top 20 at this point, that surprises even me. Honestly.
I'm really curious what those 2 are. And one of them I know for sure. And given our conversations on a few of them, honestly, I'm not really sure what the other one could be. Like I said, 4 of these are in my top 10 as it stands, but I've seen Nosferatu. I have not wrestled with that. I don't know where that's going to land for me. I think of the documentary No Other Land. Similarly, have seen that film. It's one of the best films of the year. I have not placed that yet. I don't know what to make of it. I don't know where to put it. So, some of these films, as we catch up with them, The Last Showgirl, I still have yet to see. There's still some more films to watch and catch up with. So
I'm admittedly still kind of behind on many of these foreign language films that are getting a lot of acclaim. So there's a lot of homework.
There's a few I need to see there too.
Yeah.
Like The Girl with the Needle. That's probably not going to end up in my top 20, but that's one I haven't really wrestled with all that much yet. And even when I look at my list as it is, I know that it's going to change because there's films that I deeply, deeply love that are currently not in the 20 that I find myself wanting to find a spot for. So, you're getting to that time of the year where, this is going to shift a lot. And who knows where any of this is going to land when it's all said and done.
This is going to be the least set in stone best of the year list for both of us, I think. Because I feel like for you and I, for me, I've given a lot of 4 out of 5s on Letterboxd. I don't really have that many, differentiators like I've had in the past, where there's maybe at least 5 to 10 that I'm clearly in that 4.5 to almost 5-star range that feel like, oh, these are my movies. I don't have as many of those this year. I have a lot that I really like, but not as many where it's like, like that's mine. I basically at this point now, I think I have my top 6 or something. And then I have another like 30 that almost are fighting for the 7 through 10 slot. It's a really strange year for me. Yeah.
Well, that's going to make for a really fun InSession Film Awards then, because you and I are a little bit different in that regard. I have the most 4.5 stars that I've given in any year since probably 2019.
That's incredible. Wow.
Like beyond a 10, and which is why it's going to make that final 10 kind of difficult. And I'm not sure where to go. Like I could go through like my 15, like my 11 through 15, those could be top 10 movies. And and they all share the same grade if we're talking letterbox grades. But to your point, everything else that follows, like 16 through literally 50, they could all be interchangeable in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
So I mean,
There's a lot of
obviously there's going to be
interchangeability this
some
year.
that rises up, but
Mhm.
yeah, no, and that's where it's going to be like really interesting to see where we land.
This is one of those years where once we finalize our top 10 during our award show, the term finalization is going to be the loosest it's ever been for me. Because like this is going to be one of those years where I go back after a few years and try to see how much has changed, because things probably will. This is going to be at least set in stone for me, which I'm excited about. That's neat. I like when that happens.
Yeah. And to speak to something we've said earlier too, even though I have maybe the most 4.5 star movies I've given in a year in 5 or 6 years, it still feels very different to me because one, a lot of these films did not come until like the last month and a half.
Yeah.
So like it was like I was starting to wonder about the depth. Obviously the top end will always be great in any given year, but I was curious about the depth. That has kind of answered itself for me.
Remember
also,
how worried we were back in the summer?
Oh my, yeah. And I was wondering when it was going to come. The shoe finally did drop for me, thankfully.
Yeah.
And it all kind of came at once, which is probably why I just feel so overwhelmed at the moment. But also, like when I look at my overall top 20, a lot of the films that I have here are not in the awards conversation at all. Some of them are, and some of them are slightly, but not drastically. And it's going like that's where this will end up being, I think, quite different than the last few years at the very least.
Yeah, I agree.
Like this, like, yeah, and it's gonna be fun to talk about. So, like, it kind of reminds me a little bit of, like what was that 2016? I think it was kind of this way for me a little bit. Maybe not. Maybe it was 2015. It might have been 2015.
Yeah, 2015 was the year of Inside Out and Creed and Carol and I forget what else came out. I can't keep track of years at the spur of a moment anymore.
I know it all goes by so fast.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's going to, and I think it's what's going to make the InSession Film Awards also really fun, because we're going to be able to feature a lot of films and performances and, craftsmanship that isn't going to be a part of the Oscars conversation. There's obviously going to be a crossover, but
but we'll be a little bit.
Definitely talk more.
It'll be inherently a bit more obscure for us, which is kind of neat to see.
Yeah.
I guess that whole conversation there is one giant plug for our award show in a month's time. So if you're listening, be sure to, mark that down. You don't want to miss it.
Yeah. And this conversation has been intriguing because, like, Brendan is already a bit of an enigma to me to begin with. And his top 10 always features films that come completely out of left field. So there's going to be some surprises, and I'm going to be curious to see what that is. I mean, you revealed The First Omen already, so perhaps that's a film that is maybe in your top 10. Like, I could see that certainly being the case.
Maybe.
Like maybe you have Trap at number 6. Something to that degree. I don't know.
I don't have Trap at number 6. I'll tell you that right now.
Okay.
And
but
of course,
those are the kind of fun surprises you always bring, is what I'm saying.
But of course, there won't be some surprises. There'll be some obvious ones that you're going to expect. And one of them, I mentioned there are 2 films right now in AFI's top 10 that are in my personal top 10. One of them, you know what it is, and that's Nickel Boys. That is in my top 10 right now. So I can at least reveal that now. But yeah, there might be a few obscure ones that just have stayed with me in ways that I didn't expect, honestly, even when we reviewed it in the moment. Movies have lingered for me this year in a very unique way. That by comparison to other years, they haven't lingered in the same way. And I find myself thinking about certain movies more that I didn't expect to think about more, which is a really interesting thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's what makes 2024 such a unique year. Like it's really fun to see how everything kind of came when it did, and how it kind of impacted the year overall. It's gonna be great.
Oh my God, what a rough summer What a rough summer.
It was
getting to
rough.
this point. Yeah.
We were wondering how things would end. And
Yeah.
look, when it comes to award season, you're always going to get a plethora of titles that will inevitably make its way into the conversation. But I think I was surprised by how, like, I don't know if you've ever seen that John Oliver bit that he does on his show. It's memeified. It's become a GIF as well, where, you know, he says something about how, like, it's just one certified banger after banger after
Yep.
banger.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
And that's how the last 3 weeks have felt for me. It's just like one certified banger after another. It's like, man, live. Like, it's like there's been more of a consistency than there usually is when you get that avalanche at the end.
I wonder how much of that may have been due to the strikes earlier that may have shifted some of these releases to, you know, kind of crowd themselves in that way. I guess that's a possibility. I don't know that for sure, but it does make me wonder if there were other circumstances that led to the weaker summer that we're alluding to, and then having, as you quoted John Oliver there, banger after banger after banger, which is more or less what happened with the end of the year here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I cannot wait to get to the award show. Cannot wait to see how everything falls here. So
Same here.
We'll go ahead and end things there. If you want to hear more Globes talk, again, Shadon and Erica talk about that on Chasing the Gold.
Yep.
And there will be plenty more awards conversation coming down the pipeline. Be sure to go and check out our review of The Brutalist. As we noted, that is already available. You can go and check that out. I think it's one of the best films of the year. It's really, really great. We will also have a review coming out tomorrow of Amy Adams and Night Bitch. We have a fun guest for that as well, so be on the lookout there. And we will have a new Women in Session to end the week, as we usually do.
Yeah.
Anything else, Brendan? Did I miss anything here?
I guess once again, for those who are still listening at the end of this, yes, please mark down on your calendars our InSession Film Awards. Right now, tentatively dated, not even tentative, we're officially doing this on January 12th. That is when we're doing this.
Yep.
So we kind of alluded to it already. We've got a lot of potential surprises up our sleeve when it comes to what we think are some of the better movies of the year for a year that is very interesting, as we just got done talking about. You don't want to miss it.
Absolutely. You don't want to miss it. So be on the lookout January 12th. It's going to be a great time. Cannot wait for it. It'll be a long show, but it's going to be a good one. Let us know if you agree or disagree with anything we had to say here. Leave a comment below if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, hit us up on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, Letterboxd. You can email us InSessionFilm@gmail.com. I think that'll do it for this week. So, be sure to go and check out the reviews. Check out Chasing the Gold, and we'll see you guys next time on the InSession Film Podcast. Globes need to figure out a structure here. Let's get some consistency.
Globes will be globes.